we get to a point where if our participants do not want it recorded because we're such a small group, would you both just, like if you want to share something and you don't really want it recorded and somebody to hear it, would you please just let us know that, and we can always turn off the recording.
Okay.
Okay. Sometimes, people want to bring up real personal things, and I'm more than happy with a small group just to turn off the recording for those kinds of things.
I'm going to turn off my video just so I can do some things as I listen.
Okay, that sounds great. All right. I'm probably going to keep my little side screen in there as opposed to going into full presentation mode, if that's okay, because then I can kind of direct myself here. But do you want me to turn on the record? Oh, you already did. Never mind. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Cheryl Light Shriner, and I will kind of try to direct us through how we might use some of our tools tonight. So we call it unpacking and using the tools in your toolkit, and really just looking at some strategies and maybe to do some problem solving if you've got particular challenges that you would like to talk about. I had promised last time that I would not do most of the talking this time, that I really want it to be more of a problem solving situation, and that's what I'm planning to do. So if we get done early because we have nothing to talk about, then that's fine. But I really wanted to open it up to other people at this point. So let me just kind of move on. What I'd like to accomplish, but we can always kind of stray a little bit, is to recognize function-based tools and strategies. As a behavior analyst, I always want us to remember that if we don't know the reason why the behavior is occurring, if we don't have a function in mind, picking strategies out of the air is not helpful. We really have to stay as focused as possible. I don't have all the answers to all the strategies, but we can get started. There certainly would be many, many other things that we could add to this, but my focus is on why the child is doing it, so that we can arrange things in such a way that we can make it not necessary for the child to engage in the problem behavior because of the supports that are in place. To determine which of the tool might be best, I can come up with a great list, but it's not going to fit every child. It's not going to fit every culture. It's not going to fit everybody's philosophy. It may not fit the environment. It may just not meet the characteristics of your particular child that we're talking about. So I understand that it's kind of a mix and match kind of a strategy. And if people don't agree with a particular strategy, it won't get done. And then the child is nowhere better than they were before. So it's really a problem solving issue that's going to fit people's needs in their individual situations. And then to determine which tools and strategies are the easiest to implement every day. I could give you some really evidence-based practice, but hey, that's not going to work at my house, right? So it's trying to figure out which things would actually work and would be easy to do. I think that in my experience working with teachers is, they look at people coming in as consultants and they go, you don't know what my world is like, and you're going to add 10 more things for me to do. That just can't happen. And so really to listen to people to know what might work, and give people baby steps as far as how to change the way they do things. We've got some materials that will be available to you. This presentation will be there. The recording will be posted. And then I have a kind of a little planning sheet that I call the Tools and Strategies Planning Sheet. Within that planning sheet are lists of possibilities of what you could do, and they are organized by the function of the behavior. So it gives you, like if you think your child is doing something for attention, you can go to the page that talks about strategies for attention. That's kind of how I think about things in my mind. Again, just to remind people that we have to stay focused on what the reason the child is doing whatever the problem behavior is. And so 4 acceptable categories are attention, to escape, primarily from things they don't like or things that are difficult, to obtain objects and activities that they want, like highly preferred things. And then because of some kind of a sensory need or sensory feedback that they want, or sometimes it's to get away from certain sensory experiences too, that they'll engage in challenging behavior. But these are kind of the four standard functions, and I realize that there's some things in between. Plus, you can have a behavior that can serve many functions for a child, and you can have many behaviors that serve one function for a child. And so life is more complicated than these nice little clean bubbles that I have here, and I recognize that. And this is just the way I come up with putting it in a statement so that we have done somewhat of an assessment. Parents have really a lot of good information, and all we have to do is ask them. And they can sometimes give us the when statement is like, well, it happens, in the morning before breakfast, or it happens after I ask them to do their chores, or it happens right after lunch. And so that kind of information would go on the first line. The second line is the actual behavior. And the other thing we have to kind of think about each behavior separately. And so when we're doing problem solving, we're talking about biting right now. So we're not worried about the tantrums right now. We're just focused on the biting behavior so that we can kind of stay focused. And then why do we think the child does it? Based on the evidence that we have. And so the child is biting in order to not have to do their chores, or they're doing the biting because I sat too close to them, or maybe I tried to help them physically do something and they bit me. So trying to kind of tease out exactly why that behavior would occur is really important. And I like to put it in a nice little sentence. And so that's my hypothesis statement. And then I just wanted to remind people really quickly that there's just some general things that we can do to help prevent problems, just to really make it a nurturing and highly positive environment. So if a child really is seeking lots of attention, we want to make sure that we're giving them attention, and that we are aware that attention from a child's point of view, it may not matter whether we're praising them or whether we're scolding them, right? We may put a value on that as being good or bad, but from their point of view, if they're seeking attention, all might be equal from their point of view. And so trying to just make the environment as positive as possible, and really to almost monitor our own behavior and say, if we're being very critical or corrective, that, gee, now I need to figure out 5 different ways to really tell the child how much they're worth to me, or how much value they have to me, or to just, say nice things to them, right? So there's kind of a general ratio that we should think about. Having very predictable schedules. I know that in some cases, people on the autism spectrum, they really enjoy that very regular, predictable way of going about their day. And so that can really be a helpful thing to help almost anybody feel secure. If any of you have lost your schedule and you have a lot on it, you'll kind of know a little bit about what that anxiety might be like if you can't remember what you were supposed to do at what time. And so having some predictable schedules is very good. Kind of some consistent patterns of activities. And so like on a schedule, it might be mealtime. Well, maybe there's a certain routine within your mealtime, like everybody gets their own plate, or maybe the table is already set, and maybe there's a prayer, in some families that might happen first, and then maybe it's family style, or maybe maybe somebody serves you, but to kind of have kind of a pattern for that at mealtime. Maybe at the end of the meal, everybody takes their dishes to the sink. In some families, that might be what you do. Or maybe somebody's designated to pick up the dishes and take into the kitchen. So Really having kind of a regular way of doing things can be really helpful. And then define your behavioral expectations for the person, communicate them in a really clear way. And we all may have a different way that we would consider to be clear. And so knowing our child or our student can be really helpful about figuring that out. Sometimes you can do it verbally. Sometimes you can do it verbally with some kind of a visual. Sometimes you can just hand them the visual and you don't need to be giving them verbal expectation because it's all clear within a picture. So just trying to figure that out. And these types of things can set you up for a better environment and maybe eliminate some of the things that trigger some problem behaviors. All right. These are those little charts. Again, these will all be available to you. I don't know, where do you post those, Jeannie? Can you tell me? Is it like you send them on an email or do you post them somewhere?
I send them to all the registrants.
Okay, all right, so you'll all get these. And so for this one, this is a chart that just talks about tools and strategies that you might have if you think the child is engaging in a problem behavior for attention. So we've talked about some of these already. So the things you can do before the problem occurs, you can have a predictable schedule, you can be providing choices, like in this, where they sit, who they sit by, kind of like how they're going to participate, the times for social interaction, like when they want to participate, if you're in a classroom, maybe they feel most comfortable to be the first ones to interact or participate. Maybe some of them want to hold back and be the last person to interact. Interspersing, kind of embedding attention within the routine. So if they're engaging in a 5-minute activity, you'll make sure that at the end of that 5 minutes, you are coming over to acknowledge them, right? That's kind of building in attention on a schedule so that children that are seeking attention don't have to try so hard with their problem behavior to do that because you've already built it in. And then you want to increase the times between having to give attention, but you have to do that really, really gradually. We call that building a tolerance for a delay of attention. And you can do that in all of these different functions. I always would give people the example of, my mother used to say, you only want to talk to me when I'm on the phone. And of course, my retort back to her is, you're always on the phone. But that really wasn't true. And, when I became an adult and I would still hear her voice in my head, you only want to talk to me when I'm on the phone. I thought, that was such a true thing. It was like, as long as I knew she wasn't occupied, I didn't have any urgency to talk to her. But as soon as she wasn't available anymore, I suddenly had 5 things I just had to tell her, and I had to tell them to her right now. But she was so irritated with her 4 children, because that probably was a really true statement, is that as soon as she became unavailable, we suddenly thought of all the kinds of things we wanted to talk to her about. And now I wish I could tell her that I totally understand her frustration when it came to that. But I think and that it does have a point, not just a story, but when she would then say to us, just a second. And over time, we learned that she just continued to talk for another 30 minutes, and her just a second or just a minute never was just a minute. And so I think we were always in this state of not knowing just when she would be available, because the cue she gave us, which is a very common one if you're a parent, that you do that, even with your husband or your wife, or, these are things we say, oh, I'll be with you in a minute. And then that minute goes into an hour, and then it goes into 5 hours, and then it goes into 5 days. And now you've even forgotten why you wanted to talk to them, right? I mean, that's what happens. And from a child's point of view, it just always, it keeps them guessing, and they don't understand the cue of just a minute or just a second, because it doesn't mean anything anymore. They just kind of learned that doesn't mean anything. But you can teach it in a real systematic way. I did this when I was a graduate student, is I taught a child, you know, to kind of stay with me for just gradually, second by second, a little bit longer and a little bit longer and a little bit longer. But I would always release him. You know, when I started, oh, just a second, okay. You know, and then I would reinforce him, and then I'd go, oh, just a second, okay. You know, and I did it just in second increments, and it was very effective. It's just like what you have to do is you have to teach them that the cue means something now. Another thing you could do is visual supports and time devices. So that's going to help the person know when attention is going to be available by helping them use some tools that are time management, provide clear expectations and instructions again, is going to, well, you know what, this is what I'm asking you to do right now. And as soon as you've done that, please raise your hand and I will come right over and see what you've done, so that you're actually cueing them what they need to be doing, and then when that attention will be available to them. Arrange the environment. So if I'm thinking of a classroom right now, that when you have a large space, someday when we're back after COVID is over, large space with lots of children in it, you know, you wouldn't necessarily put the child that needs a lot of attention and is maybe being disruptive because they want a lot of attention as far away from you as possible. You probably would put them a little bit closer to you so that you will have an easier time to get to them in a timely manner, so that they do not have to engage in a problem behavior. And I'm trying to think of how that might work in a house. But wherever that child happens to be, you might just be more mobile in your activities of the day, and maybe just put yourself kind of on a schedule to check in, and to proximity wise, you're just a little bit closer to the child at certain times. You know, we talked about scheduling some attention, and then also some social stories. So maybe to help the child understand what kinds of things they can do when you're busy. You know, they can let you know they want to talk to you, and then they can go do something fun for a little while, right? That might be, you know, kind of teaching them a strategy while you're busy. Of course, you have the responsibility of making sure that you follow through with whatever message that you give them. So those are kind of some things that you can do in advance. What are the things you can teach them? You know, you can teach them language. You know, can I talk to you? If they don't use language and they use an alternative form of communication, you can have them show you a picture. You know, but the message of the picture would be, you know, I want to play, or can you look at this? Can I talk to you? So give them a way to do this appropriately, and a way that you can then reinforce immediately with the attention. And so that would be, how would I respond to appropriate behavior? I added that from last week, is we really need to be catching the kids doing what we want them to do, and then to immediately deliver what it is that they want, and that would be the attention in this case. Communicate clearly that you understand the message, and tell them when you can honor that, right? Be really consistent with that. You might provide tokens or some kind of rewards. I'm thinking more in a classroom than in a home environment, where they get to purchase your time, right? And say, boy, I sure like the way you're working so hard and you're doing things independently. You know, that's so great. I'm going to give you a 2-minute time for you to come tell me what you're going to do over the summer. I'd love to hear that. You know, like they can actually buy some time to interact with you. I've seen in some schools where people earn lunch with the teacher, right? You know, and it's really an attention thing, right? It's not just the lunch part of that, it's that they get adult attention. So there might be some ways to do that. The last column, and then I may just go through the other ones really quickly, so that we can get to what you want to talk about, would be, now, how do I respond when the problem does occur, right? Because we know that that's going to happen. And when we know it's for attention, we have to do our very best not to provide the attention. And that is probably one of the hardest things to do, is because these children or individuals, because it could be of all ages, they're really good at this. They're really good at the fact that, you know, they have done this and they've received attention from you. And if you try to not give it to them, they are going to try even harder for a brief period of time to see if they can't get your attention, if they can't be successful. You know, what I call it is an escalation. It's kind of what I always used to hear, you know, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And so that is really what happens when you stop giving attention to the problem behavior. The problem behavior will, for a very short period of time, will get a little bit worse because the child is trying to figure out, wait a minute, you have always given me attention when I have slapped you, but you're not doing it now. I might have to hit you harder, you know, or I might have to yell at you to see if there isn't something I can do to get you back into the program of giving me attention. And so, however, that's the most manageable way for you to do this. It would be important to provide very minimal. If you can't stop it altogether, you'd have to really minimize the attention. I understand that if somebody's being hurt, that you have to protect people, but you don't have to give them rich attention. You can give them very minimal attention while you're blocking somebody from hurting somebody else. And so it's really a difference between high quality attention and really low minimal attention when you're reacting. I wouldn't just do that. I would want what we're doing when appropriate behavior is happening at the same time. I want to be teaching a different behavior. And as soon as there's a pause in the problem behavior, I would want to be cueing them on what the appropriate behavior is I'm expecting. And as soon as they demonstrate it, I would want to go ahead and reinforce that. And so there's kind of a trick to this kind of a thing. All right, so that's kind of the attention chart. And again, you'll get these and you can take a look at them. Escape, I have all kinds of ways that we could try to prevent escape behavior. And so I want you to realize that's a really long list. We don't have to go through all of them. Some of the things that I just talked about for attention are going to be similar. Predictable schedule again. That's going to be on all of these charts. Is making sure people understand when the really fun things are going to happen, and even the things that, you know, that they're confused about, that they know that when these things are going to be happening, right? And it makes it less confusing. I have worked with so many children where it's the unknown. And so once we established a schedule for them, things went so much better. It was the not knowing. I worked with a young woman in a group home one time, and she knew, I don't think she understood language at all. So when people approached her and they would say, you know, Alice, we're going to go out for ice cream, and she would hit them. And I was watching because I was a consultant in this situation, and I went, that's very strange. I know Alice likes ice cream. Why would she do that? And the only explanation I had for the staff of this group home was that all she heard was, like, you know, the teacher in Charlie Brown. If you ever watched the Charlie Brown cartoon, wow, 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 wow. You know, I mean, that's kind of how I was trying to understand. And so I said to this staff person, I said, wow, that I would not have expected that Alice would do that when I know that that's a preferred activity. I said, would you do me a favor and go get your car keys, because you know you're going to have to drive to the ice cream place with Alice, and your coat, and just walk up to Alice with the keys and the coat, and then say, Alice, come with me, we're going to go have ice cream. And so she did that, and Alice got right up out of her chair and walked to the door. And it was just so dramatic that having a clear way to communicate with somebody, you know, was really important. She was escaping, I believe, from the unknown. because wah, 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 wah was what her language ability was. She didn't know what was being said. And I didn't add to the story yet that she was in a rocking chair, and it was the only rocking chair in the group home. And as soon as Alice got up out of that rocking chair, you can bet there were 10 people fighting to get into that rocking chair because that was a preferred sensory experience for them. And so you think about, you know, like somebody's experience in life, and she had kind of a, probably a pretty limited one. And then I think she was very limited on her language. So having a predictable schedule is really important, embedding preferred things for the person. She wouldn't have normally escaped or tried to avoid anything if she'd had clear understanding of what was happening. So you can kind of read through some of those, and when we problem solve in just a couple minutes, maybe we'll go back to the chart and maybe, you know, pick some things from that. What could you teach the person? You could have them request assistance. In my in my example about Alice, I might have been able to, if she were confused, have her say, what? You know, she didn't have verbal ability, but, you know, maybe if she didn't understand, I could have cued her to point at a picture with a question mark or something. Because if all she heard was wah, 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 she might have said, what do you mean? And then somebody could have come to her with a picture or an object that might have better explained to her what was going on. You can give people a choice of tasks. You know, like if you're presenting a task and they don't want to do it, you might say, would you like to do, you know, your math first or your reading first? These are maybe both things they don't want to do, but giving somebody a choice of what to do at that particular moment is a very powerful thing. My dissertation was actually working with a couple of children on the autism spectrum, and we identified 4 school tasks, and they didn't like to do them. Both of these children did not like to do these 4 things. And my hypothesis is that I could reduce their challenging behavior by letting them do it in the order that they wanted to. These were the 4 tasks that they did not want to do, but they could choose which one they did first, which one they did second, which one they did third. And so I only had 2 subjects, but I did find some effects that having the ability to choose, even among things that are both unpreferred options for somebody, is a very powerful tool. So teaching somebody to choose. They can maybe self-monitor their progress, and sometimes just giving people information so that they know that they're doing well or they're not doing well, or they know when to ask for some feedback or some assistance. So helping them monitor themselves will help them know when they need to ask for help on something. Some of us just need a break. And so my only rule when I teach somebody to request a break is they can't do it until they've started, right? You can't actually have a break until you've been engaged to some extent into a task. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're just saying no. You're saying, no, thanks, I don't want to do that, which is another thing. I didn't put it on the list. Often we have non-negotiable things that we're presenting to people. And I would always say, first of all, we should say, is this negotiable? If it's not negotiable, then I can't teach them to say no, because no is not going to be an option for them, right? But I might be able to get them started, and then within a minute of starting, I can have them learn how to say, I'd like a break now. And that would be more preferable than somebody engaging in some problem behavior. And then what I would do is I would increase gradually the amount of time that they stay in the task. I can do that. They can request a different task. They can choose when. So we kind of talked about that. How do I respond to the appropriate behavior? Well, I'm going to give them exactly what they're asking for. If it's language, if they're saying, could I have some help? I'm going to help them. If they're choosing, between 2 tasks, I'm going to let them do what they have chosen, right? So I'm going to reinforce that. That is the reinforcement. I'm not using M&Ms. I'm not using something artificial. I'm using exactly what their motivation is. And then, of course, this last column is, what do I do if the problem occurs? Well, actually, I did not do this very well. I'm going to have to go in and fix this. I do not want to allow them to escape. And again, We could be setting ourselves, I wrote the wrong word, so I'll have to fix that for all of you. But whatever the function is, we want to make sure that they're not getting that for the problem behavior. They are getting escape, or they're getting help when they do an appropriate behavior, but we can't let them do that. So again, that's a very difficult thing to do in context. If you only were to not let them get out of it, it would be very difficult for everybody because they're going to escalate up, and it's going to be very, very difficult. That I see that I copied and pasted, and so I have things about attention and I need to change that. All right, similar kinds of things for tangible. There are, I mean, it's been kind of some funny stories about kids that are very, if they see a vacuum cleaner and all they want to do is go touch that vacuum cleaner or talk about the vacuum cleaner, right? They're very kind of locked into that. Well, maybe one of the things we can do is give them more access to a vacuum cleaner at times where it's appropriate for them to do so. And so, you know, giving access to it, or teaching them how to request an opportunity to go touch the vacuum cleaner. It's kind of a strange thing, but you have to, it's kind of an everyday object. And so it's not so unusual for somebody, you know, that I don't think we should avoid it. I did go into a school once and they said, you are not to at any time say the word Halloween because it's a trigger word for this particular child. And I was just a visitor and I go, fine, you know, but if I were the behavior analyst or if I was the teacher, it's like, how can you avoid the word Halloween, especially in October, right? I mean, how can you do that? So we weren't really fixing a problem. And so I would have wanted to kind of like figure out how we could kind of have taught the child to kind of at least tolerate the word as opposed to just kind of ignore it because it wasn't really fixing anything. So, you know, for tangibles, things that are really highly preferred, a bunch of things. So put them on a schedule again so they know when those objects are going to be available. If it's not a big deal, if they just need to squeeze things, Jeannie can probably say, you know, like, hey, if you could do your job while you're squeezing something, why not? You know, I mean, just go ahead and do it. Now, if they're very distracting, then what you can do in advance is not have them visible. Because if something is very distracting and somebody will kind of perseverate on something, you maybe will schedule when they can have access, but don't let them see it while they're supposed to be doing something else. So we're talking about two different people, right? Some people, if they can get their hands on it, they can actually engage and participate in whatever's happening and they can learn. If you know, the other person is going to be too distracting, you know, too distracted by it. So we'd have to kind of change the environment around a little bit. So this gives you some suggestions. We can teach them how to request the item, request assistance to obtain the item if it's not within their reach. They can choose materials, make choices. I like to tell teachers, though, if we know what their preferred items are, is there a way to build it into your lessons so that they actually can engage with those materials and learn while they're engaging in those preferred materials. And so there's lots of different things that we could do. How do we want to respond to appropriate behavior? Hey, if they're using language, let's go ahead and give them the item, or at least communicate to them when that item will be available, and maybe increase the amount of time they can go without the item, right? So we can build their tolerance. So those are things that we can do in response. If they are engaging in a problem behavior because the history shows we're going to give in and we're going to give them the cracker, if they fuss enough, we would have to really be careful not to do that, because we're just building kind of an escalated behavior. When we can't handle it anymore and we give in, we have just reinforced a much higher intensity behavior. We're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it with my own child when he was very young. Because I just couldn't stand to hear him screaming. You know, it's just like, okay, fine, you know, here you go, you got what you wanted. But if we want to really, on the long term, fix a problem, we have to really stick to our program. We have to kind of stick to the plan and know it's going to get difficult in the beginning, but that at the point where the child realizes it doesn't work for me anymore, they will stop doing the behavior. It's only going to occur when it's being reinforced, unless there's a medical reason for it. All right. And then for sensory, and I do think that sensory is probably the more difficult one from my point of view, often because it's hard to prevent a person from engaging in sensory seeking behaviors because they often own all the equipment that they need. They don't need to ask you for anything. You know, if it's self-stimulatory behavior, you know, using their own body, it makes it a little bit more difficult. One of the things, because I have some background in recreation and leisure and therapeutic recreation, is let's make sure that there's lots of fun things and stimulating things for this person to do. I've worked in institutions where there was nothing to do. And so people engaged in self-injury and self-stimulatory behavior because they had no skills and there was nothing else happening. So if we have really rich activities for people to engage in, they will be less likely to engage in kind of some self-stimulatory kinds of things. And so kind of keep that in mind. It doesn't fix all of the different situations, but that is one thing that you can do. Put them on a schedule for when they know when they can do some really high quality sensory kinds of things. I'm always challenged for leisure materials on how to replace what might be an age inappropriate thing that somebody is doing with materials that might be more age appropriate, more accepting to their peer group. And I continue my whole life, I'll be continuing to challenge with that. But what's nice about computer technology is that it seems to be a highly preferred thing, and you can program all kinds of sensory experiences using a computer. And so I think life is getting a little bit easier when it comes to things like that. Choices are in that. And so again, you start to see a lot of the similar things that has to do that. All right, I have talked way longer than I wanted to. Here is the little form that will be sent to you. I like to know kind of what the behavior is. And so it's a way to organize your own thoughts, or if you're a teacher, you know, the team that is kind of talking about a particular child and the problem. So what is the behavior of concern? You know, you just name it, you know, like biting or tantrums or whining or swearing, or, you know, whatever it happens to be, you just give it one quick little word. And then you'll really want to describe that so that everybody who's involved with the child will see the same behavior and not come up with a different definition. So you want to describe it. And then you need to figure out what is your evidence for why it's occurring. So I always like to put in that function. And so really kind of thinking about what that is. So here, if you don't have good assessment information, you're guessing. A guess is better than nothing at all if you really think about why you think that. So let's say it's for attention. You put down, I think it's for attention. And then you implement interventions that have to do with attention. But maybe you were wrong. Maybe it was for escape. The behavior will not get any better, right? So you're thinking, well, is it because the interventions were bad, or was it because maybe I had the wrong guess, right? So if you pick an intervention that doesn't match the function, the behavior could actually get worse, right? But it for sure won't get better because you didn't have a good match. Sometimes we have behaviors that have multiple functions, and they may get a little bit better, but then they plateau. And that's actually not a bad thing. And I wouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater, because something good did happen, but it probably was because the child was doing it not only for attention, but they were doing it for escape. They were using that same behavior for multiple reasons. And all you would have to do is now, okay, we got maybe the attention under control, but now we need to implement some interventions that have to do with the escape. And that should maybe bring it down even more. Where and when, so it's kind of getting at the context under which it's happening. If you don't know that information, you're not going to just implement a strategy or a tool anytime. You would really want to pick out the times that they're the problems. Who does the problem affect? It probably affects you. If you're here tonight, the problem probably affects you, right? I mean, you're the one that it's inconveniencing, or maybe it's a harmful behavior and it's hurting you. So kind of know who the key players are really important. And then how do you want it to change? When I ask my college students who have been in classrooms, they just want the child to do what they were asked to do. Okay, I call that the desired behavior, and it's from the adult. It's what the adult wants them to do, okay? And that's fine. But what's in it for the child? So, I mean, if it's not related to the function of the behavior, I always have to think, okay, so that's what you want. Now how do we make that happen? We have to still go back and consider why the child is doing it, because the child is not necessarily not doing it just to bug you. They have a particular reason why they're engaging in the problem behavior. And maybe the problem behavior just gets in the way of them completing what you want them to do. So we have to kind of always go back to what that is. But it's always good to know what you would like them to do instead, because that may lead us to a replacement behavior. Well, if he would have just asked for the cookie instead of grabbing it, I would have been fine with that. Well, that's a perfect solution. Let's put it in there. If we could teach him how to ask for the cookie, we are going to be so much better. Our lives are going to be so much better if he uses language and actually asks for the cookie as opposed to stealing the cookie. And then what we have is just, again, a way to plug in some of those interventions into the box. And so this is just an example on how we might do that. So maybe for the child that he tantrums anytime he's given a new or difficult task. I worked with a little boy in a preschool one year, several years ago, and he was difficult. He cried at the drop of a hat. And what people would say, he cries and there's no reason for it. But when I would watch him, it was anything that was new that was not familiar to him. And what we discovered is that after like an activity, even though it was the most fun activity I'd ever seen in my life, because it was new, he couldn't accept it. He could only accept things that were part of his history already. That made it really difficult in a preschool classroom. And so I was really curious. So I kind of stuck with him. And after about the 20th time something was presented to him, like objects, the crying went down, like the volume of the crying went down. And after another like 20 presentations, he actually started touching the object. And then at another 20, I mean, it took a really long time, but this poor child really had some inflexibility about brand new things. And so everything was difficult. Everything was scary to him. Whatever the reason was, anything new for this child meant bad things from his point of view. And so trying to figure out how to help him adapt and adjust, because that poor child had to realize that for the rest of his life, things are going to never be the same, and he was going to have to adjust to things. So just one of those other examples. So for here, things that I could do before, if there's a change in the schedule, I'm going to let the child know that. I'm going to give them a schedule of when tasks are. I'm going to make sure that there's like a first, then, oh, well, you're going to do this for 3 minutes, and then we get to go play. Or then it's snack time or something like that. So make sure we have kind of a first, then model it. Maybe they just don't know how to do it. So you can say, oh, let me show you this. Let me show you what I'm going to have you do in a few minutes, and then go ahead and show the child. So now maybe they understand what they're supposed to be doing. So those clear expectations. What are we going to need? I always like to know, like, do we need people? Do we need materials? And it helps you kind of plan what to have with you when you do that. What different behaviors? Ask the child to say, help please, or break, something like that. Reinforce of the completion of the task, reinforce any kind of language that is kind of indicating what their function is. We want to reinforce that. And then how will I respond to the problem behavior? I'm going to assist them to complete the task. I know it's not going to be easy because they're having a big old tantrum, but at least to a minimal degree, I'm going to have them continue to participate. I'm going to try to prompt them to engage in the proper behavior. And as soon as they do that, I'm going to release them from that task, or I'm going to, do something. So it's kind of intense at first, but having a plan is better than, not knowing what to do. All right. I promise, I'm done chit-chatting and we don't have very many minutes left. So what do you want to talk through one of your scenarios? Do you want to make comments about any of this information? Maybe you have even better ideas for different interventions. Does it fit anything that you came to this session for to talk about?
It did actually, and I'm just sitting with my friend, and I said, "Oh my God, I'm doing exactly the opposite of what she's saying." So for me, it was an eye-opening, especially with the attention one. When my daughter, her name is Ruth, she's 11. So when she's always seeking, I feel like she's always seeking attention. But and me, I'm always like right away in a second, like what happened? What's wrong? You know, which is I know it's a very big question to ask her. I'm trying to figure it out these days, but it has been, I just want to say it has been really eye-opening, and I really appreciate for you mentioning all those techniques, and I can't wait to see also having the PowerPoint so that I can go and revise for myself. But I have one question.
Sure.
These days, my daughter, she would wake up in the middle of the night, like, wow, scream. And like, I feel like my soul leaving my body because I'm like, it's in the middle of the night. And it's just like, I can't figure it out. But it's not a nightmare or anything. She would say she really prefers her reinforcements, which are M&Ms, Oreo, and chips. And then when I say, "Oh, what happened? Are you okay? Did you had a nightmare?" And she would say, "M&Ms." This is 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. And that very moment, I don't want to give her the reinforcements for many reasons because she wants more and more and more of them. How do you think I can address this behavior?
I think you could use something like a social story. I don't know, maybe Jeannie agrees with that, to talk about when I wake up at night, here are the things I can do, right? Here are the things that I probably can't do, but here are the things I could do. I could, tell mom about the dream I had. Or I could write it down. I don't know if your child can write, but I could draw a picture about something I saw in my dream. Or I could start a list of things I would like to ask mom for to eat when it's time to wake up. I used to have a rule with my son and any friends that would come over, is that until the sun is up, nobody gets out of bed, kind of a thing. And then there was the day where I heard the sun is up, the sun is up, and then I knew that that rule had kind of stuck, and that it was time for mom to get out of bed. So I don't know if that helps, but I agree with you that there's a time and a place when the reinforcer that they're asking for can be given, and probably not the middle of the night for food items. But maybe a drink, maybe they could ask for a drink of water. Maybe, they could talk to you about what they would like to ask for when it's time during the day for that. And maybe you could help them write it down and say, I won't forget, let's write it down. But right now it's time to go back to bed. So you're giving them some of the attention and then an assurance that what they want, will be coming later. Does that help at all?
Yeah, I think so. I will have to try. The problem is she's nonverbal, and she knows what she wants. If she wants things, she really wants then, and then it will be phase one. She will be asking, and then screaming, biting, banging her head, and then continuous screaming. So this stage will go on, and it's a little bit frustrating when it's in the middle of the night, like
Absolutely.
it's a bit challenging. I would have to come collect myself and then try to figure it out to calm her down, and it might take like until in the morning 6:30, and then and
Yeah,
then
would there be a
we would be
venue?
having a problem doing the activities during the day as well.
Right. Does she respond to pictures?
Yes, she does. She's
Okay.
very visual.
So what you might do is just be showing her at night what she can access at night, and then maybe put a big X through the things that are not available.
Yeah.
And again, in the beginning, as long as there's something that she might find at least mildly okay on the good list, you know, and then you just have to stick to your guns, and that the things on the X list just aren't ever going to come at her, and you know, she should stop. If at any point you reinforce, you know, the really high level behaviors with the thing that she asked for in the middle of the night, then you just kind of have a bigger problem.
Yes.
Even if it's
Yeah.
reinforced once. And hey, I get it, you know, like you're tired and everybody in your house is tired. But maybe just having a plan in the first couple times where you just can't, you just can't give in to her, things will get worse before they get a little bit better.
I also think I'd like to add that I don't know if you've investigated with a sleep specialist whether or not her quality of sleep is adequate. Most children should sleep through the night, and oftentimes sleep disorders go with autism. And so I would recommend that if you haven't seen a sleep specialist, that you do and get her sleep evaluated, because it could be something that she's waking up because her circadian rhythms are off, or some brain chemistry thing that can be corrected with medication. And it might not, the behavior might be caused, it was kind of the antecedent that Dr. Light Shriner was talking about. I would investigate
if it's a
that.
medical or a biophysical, my behavioral suggestions, I would discourage you from just doing purely what I'm asking without knowing if there's some other medical things that might be more effective. You can do things, both of those kinds of things. You can still give her choices and things like that if she wakes up. But knowing whether there's, you know, some kind of a sleep disorder associated with that, you know, the idea that it's a nightmare, that was maybe too simplistic for me to think, you know, that would be true for your child. But.
Okay. It's just that I think always I was worried about like having sleep problem, but the fact that she's asking for the reinforcement, for the preferred reinforcement, makes me think I think she wanted it. Maybe I would say during the day she would work for it, she would earn she would earn them. Like we have the penny board, she would work on them and then she would be given after finishing an activity. And she would want the M&Ms or any reinforcement without working. And I always stick to the rule. No, you don't earn if you don't work. So she's always mad. She would go mad, cry for minutes, maybe maximum 30 minutes, and then it's bedtime to sleep, brush our teeth, and then she would sleep being mad, you know, not having her reinforcement. And then in the middle of the night, she's like, she's gonna wake up and then ask me for them.
I don't think that a child is able to wake themselves up if their sleep is normal. I don't think that they're able to wake themselves up to ask for a desired reinforcement.
I think because she's already awake, that's why she asks for it, not
Yes.
that she doesn't on purpose wake herself up to ask in the middle of the night. I think it's like, you know, it's like maybe she doesn't have a good sense of time and she's thinking, oh, the day has happened and now it's time for me to earn my M&Ms, right? I mean, I don't know that she has a true understanding that it's nighttime. It's just that all of a sudden her eyes are open, so let's start my day. You know, maybe that's what she's thinking. But
and no one's around and she's bored.
Yeah,
you know,
bored.
so
Yeah.
what's she going to ask for? Something that pleases her. But truly, if you haven't had sleep investigated,
Sure.
being a mother of a child who at the age of 7 stopped sleeping, she would sleep from maybe 7 at night till 11 and then she would be awake. Yeah, I would get that investigated. I would take that to your pediatrician and take it from there.
Okay, sure, I will. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions that people would like to bring up? I can't hear you. You can unmute yourself. There
Of course, I forgot. I have a comment about the sleeping. My daughter, she takes melatonin to sleep. And anytime, she usually sleeps through, thankfully, the whole night. but anytime she usually wakes up, it's nothing, it's like not a pleasant experience for her. So maybe the little girl that we're talking about is feeling unpleasant and looking for some sort of like a comforting thing. So
I thought of that too, M&Ms are obviously a comforting item. I wonder if there might be, like a heated pillow or a water bottle or, something else that might be comforting.
yeah, she would definitely probably have to be either weaned out of that or, just cold turkey. It would be unpleasant for some time. Hopefully it wouldn't be unpleasant for too long. Because
Yeah.
I know if your kid doesn't sleep well, it like ruins their day and they're not very, emotionally regulated for the rest of the day. So that was just a comment. My question was, in after some years of, analyzing her behavior and, the purpose of it. So a lot of times it's attention for my daughter. But I think a big factor of it is my own motherly guilt. Because after a while you get used to, and she gets used to me comforting her and
Yes.
giving into her. So my concern is that, and I need to get this reinforced myself by you, the experts, that it'll be okay. Because I can sometimes feel like, okay, it's not fair to her. She's not going to understand. She's confused. My mom has been responding this way for so long when I do this. And she'll verbally say, don't you love me or don't you care? And so that is something that is very difficult to, to stand my ground. So I just, what have you seen in the long run with your interventions?
I think it will be difficult in the beginning, but one of the things you do is you just schedule attention with her, right? And so if I were doing a research study, I would be very careful and say, how often does she seek out your attention? And I would get many, many data points, and I would see what the least amount of time that goes by where she seeks you out. And let's say it's 10 minutes. Sometimes it's, 11 minutes, sometimes it's even a half hour, maybe it's even an hour, but the very shortest period of time where she needs you is like on a 10-minute schedule. I would probably start there. And so I would be checking in with her and say, oh, I just love you so much. Give me a hug. And, what do you want to show me right now? Or, like something that's on a schedule where you're delivering it without any contingency on her part at all. It's like, and then you can kind of start to increase the amount of time between, not that you won't want to do it spontaneously occasionally. You feel free to do that, Mom. But it's kind of knowing what her need for attention is, and then you providing it at her level, and then start to kind of wean her a little bit more, so where she can go a little bit longer and a little bit longer, but she knows you're going to come back. Maybe you even do saying, I have 30 minutes where I have to go and do my laundry. One thing that is kind of a good is that you have some very highly preferred activities for her to do while you're busy.
Yeah.
And it will, even though that's a tangible kind of thing, it will distract her long enough for you to get your work done for the 30 minutes, right? And so what we call that is competing reinforcers. Even though she just wants your attention, you can compete with that by giving her something really fun to do. This is why parents use TV and videos, right? It's like they try to distract the child just long enough so they could get something done. And I say that's fine. That is just fine as long as you're being consistent and you come back in order to give them the attention they so want. And so I don't think there'll be any doubt in your child's mind that you love her, but she knows what weapon is going to work with you. That's the weapon, and it works every single time for her to accuse you of being a bad mom or being a mom that doesn't love her. Like, which one of us wants to hear that from our child?
Right.
And so you're just going to have to take it as neutrally as you can possibly take it.
Mhm.
and then just start fresh again. And
Mhm.
after that 10 minutes is over and she's not being mean to you anymore,
Yeah.
you go back and say, you know how much I love you, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
That kind of a thing. So
And we're
maybe that
gonna
would help.
we're definitely gonna need some more of these sessions once the pandemic's over, because the kids are so used to having us with them all the time
I
at
hear
home.
you. Yeah, it's like
Uh,
weaning them off that constant adult interaction, or at least the parent interaction.
mhm.
And they're going to have to go and tolerate other people in their life.
Yeah, who are not like mommy.
So Jeannie and I talked about it for both of you that came. I so appreciate it. That I didn't accomplish my promise. I'm so sorry. But that we'll just have a session and I won't have anything planned, and we'll just come back to some of the same guidelines and just let people talk like you've been doing, right? I mean, these are the kinds of things that I love to talk about. And I just have to stop being a college professor and I just have to be somebody who listens. That's what I would love to do for a couple sessions in the spring. And I think Jeannie already agreed with me on that. So we'll just
Yes,
have
I
a
mean the
forum,
information.
challenging behavior forum, come talk to us.
It's,
So
I mean, the information is absolutely invaluable, but after like 6 years of like taking a lot of trainings, it'd be awesome to have like just like
problem
help
solved.
me in this situation, like specific situations.
And I
Thank you
love
very
the
much.
fact, yeah, I love the fact that you came in and that you're pretty sure it's for attention. Okay, well, let's talk about that then. Where I get a little nervous is where we have somebody and we really don't have any idea. And then people need to invest in that specialist to come in and take some data if you really don't have any. But, I think parents really do know. I think parents really have a good idea. And like you say, but they battle with the guilt. They battle with the, you know, what people might think or what the child will say to me or that kind of thing. And so these kind of groups or these sessions can maybe we can all just as moms get together and support each other, like you go girl kind of a thing. That'd be great.
Yeah, that's definitely on the docket for spring. So be where did you find out about these sessions? You can't remember, that's right.
I'm almost sure it was from ARCAD. I'm
Okay.
almost sure.
Okay, keep, looking for that.
You
Things will
know,
probably start up in February.
I don't think there was a lot of you know, awareness of this, because I'm surprised there's only two, but I just became the secretary of CPS's ODLS what is it called now? Family Advisory Board. So please email me and these parents will distribute information
Perfect.
about
Wow.
these.
Great.
These are very
If you
useful.
could please email me, it's
Mhm.
JJ Kramer.
Give me
And
one second. You might not see me, but I'm just opening another app to write that. Say that again. JJ.
J Kramer at
Uh-huh.
illinois.edu. And
And
I'll be emailing you tomorrow the materials, so you'll have my email address at that point too. And
perfect.
if you
Thank
could please just email me back your contact information, and then I'll be sure to forward all of our events to you as well.
Great.
We have a Facebook page. We also have a newsletter that goes out monthly, and then we also have a website. So
Okay.
all of those things.
That's my email.
Okay, I'm copying it down right now.
Great. Thank you both for coming. And I look forward to seeing you at some of our other sessions.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank
Have a
you,
good
Dr. Light
holiday
Shriner.
time. A nice vacation time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Happy
Thank
holidays.
you. Thank you very much.
Bye. Something in the chat. Was that her email in the chat?
Yes, that's her email. Okay. Thank you so much, Cheryl.
Yep, you're welcome. I don't know if our other person has one more question or anything. Anything